Sony just released a brand new camera that all the YouTubers are saying is the best vlogging camera ever. But could they be overhyping this camera that they received for free? Possibly. Before this release, it has always been a toss-up between Sony and Canon. But now, Sony comes out with a new design catered specifically for content creators and is undeniably the best point-and-shoot vlogging camera there is. And based on how long it takes Canon to release a new camera, it's gonna be that way for a while. But just how much better is this camera, and is it gonna be worth it for you to upgrade from your old RX100 or G7X? We're gonna answer that question today by going over the pros and cons. Quick hints: it might not be. Alright guys, if you're new to the channel, my name is Gabe Tran. I make weekly videos on videography, cameras, and tech. So if you want any tips and advice on how to better your content creation, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Okay, since I know how impatient people can be, I'm gonna start off this video with my overall takeaway of this camera and who I think it's for. If you are a content creator with no interest in deep diving into videography and photography, and you just want a camera that can do everything you need in a small form factor, this is the camera for you. You can run a whole YouTube channel off this one little camera. On the other hand, if you're a creator who cares a little bit more about getting the best image quality, it might not be worth it. I'm assuming you probably use a DSLR or better as your main camera, and as a secondary camera, it just isn't worth the upgrade if you already have a point and shoot. And if you don't have one yet, this video doesn't really apply to you, so not quite sure why you're here, but feel free to hang out and help me increase my audience retention. So to reiterate, if you're a vlogger who wants a point and shoot as their workhorse, this is the perfect camera for you. Get it. But if this is a secondary camera that you won't use too often, then you probably don't need an upgrade. Alright guys, so unfortunately I do not have the ZV-1 in hand as I was not blessed by Sony with an early release, but I have researched and watched every single YouTuber's review on it, and I also have the RX100 Mark V, which the camera was based off of, so you can kind of say I'm an expert on this camera, even though I've never actually seen it in person. So anyways, here's how the video is gonna work. I'm gonna go over the pros and cons to upgrading to this camera, but for each pro and con, I'm also gonna give a rebuttal if I have one. And hopefully me essentially arguing with myself will help you make your decision. Alright, first con, this technically isn't a brand new camera. It's actually old technology based off of the Mark V that they fluffed up with some new features. So the camera's capability and video quality isn't gonna be any better. The rebuttal to that is that the image quality in these RX100s is already really good, and the new features actually do address a lot of the nuances when it came to vlogging with this camera. The next con is that there is still no wide angle. This is relating to the first point. It is using the same exact lens as the Mark V, and this lens is just slightly too tight to be ideal, especially if you have the steady shot stabilizer on, which this camera needs pretty badly, to be honest. The G7X does a much better job at stabilizing without cropping in too much. For my rebuttal, although I do prefer it to be a little bit wider, I never felt that 24mm was too tight. Even though it's not wide, I've always found it just wide enough to get every shot that I need. 24mm is very workable. The next con is the battery life. It didn't get any better. So the great thing about point and shoots is its tiny size, but with a tiny camera comes a tiny battery. And with this camera, you're only gonna get about an hour before it dies on you. So even though you have a more compact camera, you still gotta make space for a bunch of batteries. The rebuttal for this point is that Sony actually lets you charge your camera and record at the same time. So if you do need to record for long periods of time, you can actually just plug your camera into an external power source. Alright, the next con is that it's expensive. $800 is not cheap. You can get a Sony a6400 for that price, and that camera can do a lot more. And it's not really that much bigger. So unless you need the absolute smallest camera you can get, you're better off getting something else. The rebuttal to this is that you're getting an all-in-one package with this camera. Versus if you get an a6400, you still need to buy the lens and accessories for it. Also, to be fair, Sony did cut the price down when compared to the RX100. But that leads me into my next point, which is build quality. Okay, so I know in order to cut the price down, you're gonna have to cut some corners. And you would think that reusing old tech would be enough have to cut down on costs, but come on, you gotta cut on the build quality as well. I really think that they should have kept the aluminum metal body, but instead they're using a cheaper plastic material that I'm not sure will hold up as well. And trust me, if you're vlogging on a daily basis, you're gonna beat this thing up. I mean, if you look at this G7X, it's been dropped multiple times. There's dings and dents on it. The screen is cracked. I mean, these cameras, oops, they go through a beating, all right? But my rebuttal to that is that just because it's plastic doesn't quite mean it's not durable. For instance, game controllers are made of plastic, and those things can take a beating. By far, the biggest pro to upgrading is that flip out screen. This, in combination with that hot shoe mount, makes it so you can get great audio easily. This is really the main benefit of a flip out screen versus a flip up screen. Plus, they were even smart by putting the audio ports on the opposite side of the screen so it wouldn't get in the way. But my rebuttal for this point is, the whole reason I would use a point and shoot camera instead of a bigger DSLR is because it's quick, simple, and pocketable. Once you add an external mic to this mix, it's none of those. And at that point, I might as well just use a DSLR. God damn. But this also leads me into my next pro, which is it has a built-in directional mic. So you might not even need an external mic. Plus, it also comes with a dead cat that you can easily slip on and off. No more having to tape on DIY dead cats. All right, last pro on the list, but it's kind of a big one, is that it has better usability. Sony included a bunch of features with this camera that makes vlogging with it so much easier. To name off the main features, it's got a big record button, a grip, a record light, a touch screen, the product showcase feature, face priority auto exposure, and the soft skin effect. All right, let's go over some of them real quick. They now have a big record button on the top of the camera, which makes it a lot easier to click and go. Before, they had this tiny little record button in the back, which could be difficult to press. The new grip makes it a whole lot easier to hold out in front of you. Before, there was no grip, making it super slippery and easy to drop. And now there's a flashing record light in the front of the camera, so you can make sure that the camera is rolling. All right, so my quick rebuttal for these details, these little design changes are nice, and it's what makes it more of a vlogger's camera, but these changes on their own is pretty insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Like, come on, are you really gonna pay more money for a bigger record button? G7Xs came with grips standard, and you can actually buy a grip for your RX 100 like I did. And to be honest, Sony should have included a grip in the first place. So is this really an upgrade? And the record light is nice to have, but you can also figure out whether or not you're recording by the little red dot on the screen. So it's not super necessary. Next feature is the touchscreen. This is really only an upgrade for those with older RX 100s, as the newer ones and the G7Xs have touchscreens. Touchscreens makes focusing on specific objects or people really easy. And it's also a lot faster than manually setting it with the buttons. And when you're vlogging, you want to be able to do things quick because you don't want to miss the moment. My rebuttal for this is that touchscreens really should have been standard a long time ago. I mean, it's 2020. It better have a touchscreen. But even though they did include one, it only works for touch to focus. It does not work for operating the menus, which, by the way, Sony menus can be a little confusing. This makes zero sense to me why they would do this. Maybe so you don't accidentally change the settings, but since you can't operate the menus using the touchscreen, anytime you need to change a setting, you gotta flip the camera back, flip back the screen, and change it using the buttons. Not exactly ideal. All right, next feature is the product showcase feature. This is an autofocus setting that will switch focus to whatever you hold in front of you. This is great for vloggers as they are oftentimes showcasing items. Now you don't have to awkwardly cover your face in order to get it to focus on an item. You see, with this camera, if I hold something out here and my face is still showing, it's not gonna know that I want it to focus on the item. For this feature, I don't have a rebuttal for this because I honestly think it's a great new feature, and I hope that more future cameras will have this function. All right, next feature is the face priority auto exposure. This is one of those features you didn't know you need until you don't have it. Let me explain. So my first point and shoot was the Canon G7X, and Canon always had this feature, so I never really thought anything of it because it just worked. But when I first started using the RX 100, I noticed immediately how crucial this function was. Let me just demonstrate. All right, right now I'm shooting on the Canon G7X, which does have this feature. So right now my face is properly exposed. Even when I turn the camera around, and I become backlit. So with the lights behind me, my background is a lot brighter, but it's still exposing for my face. Alright, right now I'm shooting on the Sony RX100 Mark V, which does not have the face priority feature. And right now my face is properly exposed, but when I turn around and become backlit, you can see the exposure quickly changes. So without this feature, it has always been a struggle to get proper exposure with this camera. Now some people may argue that you should be shooting in manual mode anyways, but I almost always shoot in auto when I'm using a point and shoot. The whole reason I'm using a point and shoot and not something else is because I don't want to be messing with all the settings. I mean, it's in the name of the camera, point and shoot. My only rebuttal for this is, like the touchscreen, this is a feature that should have been long included. I mean, the G7X had it since the Mark 1. Alright, next feature is the soft skin effect. This is a feature that will smooth out blemishes and reduce the need for makeup. Definitely handy for beauty vloggers and for anyone who's a little self-conscious. My rebuttal for this is that one of the reasons we watch YouTubers instead of traditional celebrities is their rawness and authenticity. With this feature, you're sort of taken away from that. And as counterintuitive as it may sound, if you're a beauty vlogger, you definitely don't want to be using this feature. People are looking to you for tips and advice on makeup, but with this feature, you're basically putting on artificial makeup. So by doing so, you're deceiving your viewers. And if you're the self-conscious type, you probably shouldn't be vlogging anyways. So in my opinion, this feature is kind of a gimmick, but I'm sure there's some people out there who will like it. It's kind of like when you do those Japanese photo booth pictures. Yo, while I was editing this video, I found this phone app that does something similar. This is with skin functioning off, and this is with it turned up to the max. Not too shabby if I may say so myself. Alright, last feature, which is kind of a slept on feature actually, is their defocus button. This makes it so that you can automatically get background blur with a touch of a button. Nowadays, everybody wants a little bit of background blur in their videos. It just makes it look more professional. And with this feature, you can achieve that super easily. But actually, the way I like to view this feature is as a one-touch ND filter button. Anytime I would shoot outside in sunlight, I would always have to go through the menus to manually turn on my ND filter so that the camera doesn't shoot at a high shutter speed and my footage doesn't look choppy. But now I can do that with a touch of a button. So with this feature, I'm all for it. No rebuttals from me. Alright guys, that's it for my list of pros and cons. Obviously, there's a lot more features that I could go over, but those are the main ones. I think that the ZV-1 is a great camera, and it is the first time that a camera company has designed a camera specifically for content creators. It definitely checks off a lot of boxes when it comes to the perfect YouTube camera. But there is no such thing as a perfect camera yet. So to sum everything up, if you already have a point and shoot and only use it as your secondary camera, don't fall into the hype and feel like you need to get this camera. But if you use your point and shoot more than often, or you use it as your main camera, or you're looking to simplify your gear, then this camera will be perfect for you. Just don't expect your video to look any better than before. The main reason for getting this camera is not an upgrade in video quality, but rather an upgrade in quality of life as a content creator. This camera was designed for one thing, to make content creation easier. Now that I put it that way, should I get it? But anyways, I'm really glad that a camera company has finally started listening to us and catering to our needs as creators. But what I'm truly looking forward to is Sony doing the same thing, but with a DSLR. I would like to think that Canon is working on a similar project, but let's be real. Canon isn't forward-thinking enough to be doing this. But I guess one can hope, but I also wouldn't be very hopeful because, I mean, you guys saw how much of a letdown that G7X Mark III was. I had high hopes for that camera. But Sony, I might just have to switch over completely. Sony's doing the right things, man. Anyways, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be here waiting for you guys next week.